really underprepared.
It's okay. This is just fuzzy stuff. It's just coming from the heart.
I don't even know my question. What's my question?
You really be coming from the heart. Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
It got me. Asked me a question
Sir,
about
we have a
Space
seat
Force.
for you right up there.
I'm like, Space Force?
You
why,
do?
Why Space Force?
Yeah, why me? Right?
Yeah.
You're like looking at your tag.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, please set your electronic devices to silent, but have them ready to email or text your questions for the panel to askmecerts@gmail.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Brigadier General Paul Friedenberg, U.S. Army retired Executive Vice President for National Security and Defense, AFCEA International, to the stage.
All right, so we all had to pick out some songs because we couldn't let our boss, steal the entire show here. So we had to pump up a little motivation here. But it's my pleasure to introduce our first panel session this morning, Shaping the Cyber Capabilities of the Joint Force. Just a couple of reminders, questions. So we're not only here to hear from the panel members, we want to hear from our audience. We're all working together as a team to solve some of these wicked hard challenges that we have. So please, a reminder that you can text your questions to askmecerts@gmail.com. And also, this session has been approved for continuing education. So if you're interested in documenting that, we have some scanners in the back of the room that you can take advantage of. You just scan your badge there, and we'll document this session. Now, those scanners will turn off about 15 minutes after the session, so please don't get involved in any heavy discussions until after you scan your badges. Now, also unpaid political announcement, but that scanning capability and the automatic documentation of that is a membership benefit for our AFCEA members. So if you're not a member, you go to booth 301, and you can take advantage of those and many other membership opportunities and benefits that we have here. Now, moderating this morning's panel is my boss, and she's the president and CEO of AFCEA, Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, U.S. Army retired. She's a leader in defense information technology and communication systems. And she concluded her remarkable 41-year Army career, where she went from E1 to 09 as the Army CIO G6. Now, there's a lot of motivation and opportunity in there as an exemplar to many of us here in the room. After retiring from the Army, and before she joined our AFCEA team, she held leadership positions with Booz Allen Hamilton and Accenture Federal Systems. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm welcome for General Lawrence and this morning's panel.
Thank you, Paul, for the kind introduction, and a special shout out to Mike Warlick for having put together this formidable panel. And we set out, we wanted to be joint, and it is joint. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us today. I've served in a number of joint positions myself, so I look forward to hearing from all of you on what's going on in that world as we talk about shaping the cyber capabilities of the joint forces. And as we look at the terrain of operating in this pandemic environment, the complex multi-domain cloud architecture, and the current situation in Russia and Ukraine, this is a very timely panel subject that we're going through here now. And it's now more than ever, it's important that our services work together to collaborate and find the answers to our most complex challenges facing us, not only in the joint environment, but with our international partners as well as we go forward. So our first speaker is Rear Admiral Stephen Donald. Admiral Donald is currently the Reserve Deputy Commander of 10th Fleet. Over the last decade, he has served in Iraq, working in intelligence missions, established U.S. Cyber Command's Joint Task Force Ares, and until the current assignment, he supported operations Resolute Support and Freedom Sentinel, building an over-the-horizon virtual teaming capability, which was so key at that time in delivering not only intelligence, but command and control, logistics, finances, all those needed to be successful for the warfighter that's out on the pointy end of our spear. Admiral Donald, thank you for being here.
Thank you, ma'am. It's my pleasure to be here today. And I'd like to thank AFCEA for putting this event together this week, particularly this panel, right? Even in a highly connected digital world that we live in, our advantage is the people that can come together with diverse experience, backgrounds, and perspectives that can solve tough and challenging problems. And I think we have a number of tough and challenging problems, as General Stanton pointed out today. I'm representing 10th Fleet, Fleet Cyber, and the United States Navy here on this panel today. And broadly speaking, U.S. 10th Fleet has 14,000 sailors, active duty reserve, government civilians, and contractors that are performing global network operations across the globe today. The 10th Fleet enterprise is remarkable in that it encompasses the full gambit of cyber operations, whether it's DoDIN operations, defensive cyber operations, or offensive cyber operations. And we are challenged in making sure that our sailors and our workforce is ready for the next event coming up, whatever the next challenge may be. And so really, I think our fundamental challenge is working at getting at and making sure that we have the right talent in the right place at the right time. I have personally been able to be in the cyber realm for about 2 decades now, hardcore cyber, and I've been able to serve as a military service member. I've been able to serve as a government civilian. I've been able to serve as a defense contractor and as a venture capital-backed commercial vendor, right? And what I've learned through all that, I will tell you, is that individually they all bring some unique capabilities, but it's together that if we come together as a team, we can really solve these hard, challenging problems. The Joint Force provides this benefit of diverse thinking, capabilities, integration, and global reach. To leverage this for cyber, we have to shape the capabilities. And the next step is truly upping our game to fuse modern-day technology with modern-day thinking. We need to move from developing cyber zombies, which, if you've ever attended a military course, they will tell you exactly what the answer might be. We need to move from that into developing puzzle solvers. And it's these puzzle solvers that will get us to the next generation. And how do we do that? We have to bring in new approaches to common modern learning environments. The Navy has a concept called ready, relevant learning. That concept for the Navy is to bring the right training at the right time in the right sailor's career, so that we can have the advantage of getting that sailor ready to do what they need to do. But it's not it's not our current set of monolithic courses that we bring through. It is breaking that down into more digestible chunks that we have seen our society really adopt to, right? I've learned many things via YouTube over the last couple of years. How to change my headlights in my car, how to adapt new technologies into my house. All of those things, I just pick up a 15-minute video and I learn. And I think that's the future, more so than these monolithic courses that we've developed over time. Additionally, right, as I look through, again, two decades of doing this, when we first started this, it was all on-the-job learning. I wouldn't even call it JQRs. It was just, hey, this is how I do this. Let's go do this. And we've come so very far in this time, but we have to push the limits and go much farther. We have to reduce the time it's taking to build these puzzle solvers. And I think one of the key ways of doing that is to really push forth challenges, that are adapted to the environment that we have, the training that we need, to the understanding that we need, but just constantly be challenging all of our folks whenever they've got a little bit of sliver of time to go do these exercises, to expand their thought, solve these puzzles, and get on to the next challenge. Really, the enterprise writ large has to take a look at where it is that we're making our investments. And as I look at the continuum, there's stuff that is what I would call almost commoditized. It's foundational work, right? And then there's the stuff that's on the pointy end of the operational spear that is really bespoke. We have to do the bespoke work. That is what is truly the government aligned work that has to be done for operations, supported by our industry partners. But as I continue to look, why is it we're doing so much in the foundational realm? And we do a lot in the foundational realm, mostly because of the policies and procedures that we've sort of grown up with. And we really need to take a look at what can be done with modern technologies. For instance, there's a wide concept called the School of One, where you harness a great deal of interactive technologies and different learning and teaching approaches. And you really build sort of a curriculum for any one individual that gets them accelerated into their work role, and it's very, very adaptable. And that's sort of the vision of Navy's Ready Relevant Learning, is that we have this really adaptable capability to bring our sailors up to the right to the right learning level to meet the challenges that we need to meet. So with that, I'll turn over back to you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much. Next is Major General Ryan Heritage. He is the Commanding General of Marine Forces Cyberspace Command. He previously served as the Commanding General, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Western Recruiting Region, Deputy Director of Future Operations, and U.S. Cyber Command. All great jobs as we talk about the challenge of our workforce, training them and retaining them as we go forward. General Heritage was previously a branch head at the Programs and Resources Department, Headquarters Marine Corps. Prior to that, Ryan served as the Deputy Commander for Marine Forces Cyberspace Command at Fort Meade, Maryland. General Heritage participated in Operations Iraqi Freedom, along with the operations in former Yugoslavia and Haiti. General Heritage.
Thank you, General Lawrence. I was pausing to see if there's going to be any theme music, and if anybody can make a connection between Marine Corps boot camp and the job now, let me know. So, but thanks to you and the AFCEA organization for the opportunity, and thank you to the ladies and gentlemen in the audience for the opportunity to participate in this panel, and really look forward to your questions. So while this morning's session is titled Shaping Capabilities of the Joint Forces, I thought I'd start by providing some context or background against which MARFOR Cyber is doing so, and as a result, helping to generate advantages and create synergy for Fleet Marine Forces through cyberspace. So MARFOR Cyber is comprised of about 3,000 Marines and civilians stationed and deployed around the world, and every one of whom is focused on strategic competition, particularly the pacing challenge of China. But regardless of the threat, whether it's a nation state or non-state actor, we are charged with posturing the network and the force to be effective across the spectrum, from competition to crisis and conflict and back again. Two documents that help drive our shaping of the force are the Commandant's Force Design 2030 and the Concept for the Stand-in Force. Concepts that clearly outline the Marine Corps' transformation from a force focused on countering violent extremism to one focused on strategic power competition, with a special emphasis in the Indo-Pacific region. This guidance has caused us to re-examine our traditional models for organizing, training, and equipping the force, and in many cases to adopt different models that reflect a new desired ends and acknowledge the incredible advancements in technology. To quote General Berger, Commandant of the Marine Corps, the emergence of revisionist great power competitors coinciding with a sea change in the character of war, are driven by social and technological change, demands that we move rapidly to adapt to the circumstances of a new era. I think we see some of this playing out in today's current events. Every day we are seeing how influence and information competition is being used to shape both current and future conflicts, and there's no sign of it slowing down. The proliferation and pace of change for cyber and space capability is unprecedented in scope and scale. From near-peer powers to non-state actors, heavy investments are being made in an effort to harness cyber and space to further objectives, gain advantage, and create asymmetries at the point of conflict. Our Marine Air Ground Task Forces, or MAGTAFs, are founded upon the concept of maneuver warfare and combined arms. We at the component level are striving to achieve the same, just in a different domain. And I would propose that none of this is possible without a solid network and incredible people. From network modernization to culture to codifying new occupational specialties in the cyber field, change is constant, and we are getting after our mission to secure, operate, and defend the network in a manner that speaks more to an ability to fight the network than simply manage one. We are talking about network modernization as the foundation for closing kill chains in a contested environment where data is the crown jewel and data analytics are not just talked about by commos of the world, but by commanders, operators, and analysts. The Commandant and the service has invested heavily in MAR4 Cyber. In addition to creating additional Marine occupational specialties and updating policy and doctrine, we are reorganizing for the next fight. We've established an integrated ops center designed to maintain awareness within the information environment and leverage U.S. Cyber Command authorities in support of the Fleet Marine Force, the Combatant Command missions. Our vision is to establish a global C2 node for Marine Corps operations in the information environment. We're aligning intel collections, synchronizing effects, and matching our sister services at echelon for greater operational integration is the norm and scalable. None of this, however, would be possible without resilient networks. The more dispersed we are, the more resilient our architecture and people must be. Our commitment to our Marines and civilians and to the efforts to recruit, train, and retain the best Marines and civilians possible is unwavering. Regardless of the technology available, our Marines and civilians are our center of gravity. From the Commandant's Talent Management Initiative to our own intern program, we are collectively transforming the industrial models for talent and workforce management into agile, relevant models for today. Competition for resources and time is keen. Ruthless prioritization is a must. The need to be ready in the information environment is now. So thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Our third panelist is Brigadier General Terrence Adams. General Adams is the Military Deputy Director of Concepts and Special Assistant for Cyber Effects, Headquarters Air Force, part of the A216. He assists with developing and synchronizing Air Force strategy and strategic planning efforts. He also executes Air Force wargaming in support of Air Force Chief of Staff's Title X responsibilities. General Adams deployed to Oman, Iraq, Qatar, as well as Combined Joint Force Horn of Africa. I forgot to ask you, did you go to Great Djibouti there during your mission? I could forget that place. General Adams and I have a lot in common, as he started out as an E1 as well and is moving his way up the ranks. So thank you for being with us, sir.
Well, thank you, man. Thank you for that warm introduction, and happy to be here. And I like Bruno Mars, too, so my intro music is usually Uptown Funk. So you got it. All right. The next time we start. But thank you, man. Thanks for this opportunity to share a few words. And additionally, thanks for your leadership being at AFCEA. We look forward to partnering with you as we lay out some agendas that we want to work closely with the Air Force about. All right, so I'm here, probably the non-operational person. I'm a staff weenie up here at the Pentagon. And so I'll bring you a different perspective about what the Air Force is doing as relates to our vision. So arrived at the Pentagon and started to stand up a strategic net assessment team. If you understand the Office of Net Assessment and what they do, looking at red capability versus blue capability, when General Brown first stood up and started his action orders, this is one team that he wanted to provide an assessment. Before, this team was just looking at funding. How are we doing in comparison to our adversaries based on the amount of money that we were putting toward different requirements? he wanted to look at capability. So we stood up this team, and of course, cyber is one of those entities that we were trying to develop under this net assessment team. They did that for about 2 years, and then General O'Brien, Mary O'Brien, who's going to be the Joint Staff J6 this summer, grabbed me. So now I'm working as a special assistant for cyber effects. First task with that, we have a new secretary, and the secretary wants to focus in on cyber EW as well. And I just got a text today. I've been working for this for about 6 months. He just signed the cyber task order we've been working on for a while this morning. So happy to hear that. And inside this task order, it is really looking at our strategy. What are the things that we need to focus on? It's looking at our combined strategy between different entities in the Pentagon on the air staff that have stood up, from our A26 function that's separate now from our CIO, addition to organizations that are doing software development, data, where does data go inside the organization, our chief data officer, our chief software development officer, and also our architects. All those things, we're looking at doing a reorganization to try to find the right home for those things. And all those things are affecting the warfighter. Additionally, the Secretary asked us to look at requirements relating to funding. Our A8 shop programmers have been forcing us to fund what's inside our portfolio. And so what that's done is limiting us our ability to do offensive cyber, defensive cyber, and also keep a strong foundation network, because all of that comes out of the same pot of money. So the Secretary is asking us to relook at that. And then the final thing that we're doing is looking at the workforce. And that's what this conversation today comes in, about the talent. Do we have the right talent for the future? Additionally, do we have the right mix? Inside our career field, one of my side jobs that I have is also being the developmental chair for the Air Force for our cyber forces. So we have one family of AFSCs that we have, our specialty codes, and under that we have a shred out that does offensive cyber. We have another shred that does defensive cyber, another one that does network operation, and then the final shred that does expeditionary comms, the folks who go out and deploy. So those are the four specialty codes that we have that make up the cyber operations family. As we see tasks that are coming down, we're seeing the pull and strain between those two shreds, but it does give us the flexibility to have one person managing all of those different entities under one umbrella. So we can move people in and out of those career fields and have the structure so they can progress up the ranks. So that was the final piece. We're getting a lot of interest, as you all well know, from Congress about keeping the talent. I think earlier today I heard the speaker talk about what General Nakasone talked about, and that the main thing that keeps them up will be, do we have the right talent? And now we're looking at different ways to retain folks. One question we just had is that there's always a conversation about can we retrain people with more money? Now we're finding out that some of our airmen may want to have non-monetary benefits, choice of assignments, shorter duration of assignments, right? So we're also looking at non-monetary opportunities for those folks too. And then the final piece that we have, I would say, is the strain that we see also on the Space Force. As it is growing, we're seeing some different questions that have been asked of us to be to transition that workforce. But pulling from those resources, to give you a quick background, the Space Force, as you all know, is our latest force, very new. It's going to be smaller than the Coast Guard, topping out probably about 18,000 people. So it's going to be a very small force. And so if you believe, like on the heels of Mother's Day, if you believe that the Army birthed the Air Force and the Air Force birthed the Space Force, then we have the Army is the grandmother of the Space Force, right? And we're seeing the struggles of the smallest child in the room wanting to get more, and we're going to have to feed that entity more. And I'll take a question about that later if you want to deep dive in Space Force stuff, because I think it will be interesting for you to learn more about the Space Force. So I'll wrap it up with that, with my intro words, and look forward to your questions later.
Thank you. Don't confuse grandmother with age either. Our next panelist is Mr. Wendell Foster, Jr. He currently serves as the Executive Director for Joint Forces Headquarters, DoD Information Network, or DODIN as we familiarly call it. He is responsible for providing command and control of the execution of global DoDIN and defense cyber operations, as well as synchronizing these efforts with U.S. Cyber Command, the service cyber components, and field agencies. Prior to this position, Mr. Foster served as the Marine Forces Cyber Command Advanced Capabilities Director, where he managed the end-to-end requirements, resourcing procurement capabilities, and development and delivery processes for the Marine Forces Cyber Command and JFHQC. Mr. Foster, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you to AFCEA and for the guests for the opportunity to speak here today, as well as the distinguished panelists that are up here as well. As was stated, I'm the Executive Director for Joint Force Headquarters DoDIN, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that before my opening comments. So Joint Force Headquarters DoDIN, as was stated, is a subordinate command of United States Cyber Command. And we've been pretty much given the mission of to secure, operate, and defend the DoDIN. So how do we do that? We don't own any network space actually at all. So we integrate, synchronize, and direct those operations across the 46 DoD components, what we call DoDIN areas of operation. So expanded control for Joint Force Headquarters DoDIN is 1 to 46 when it comes to those DACO authorities to direct defensive cyberspace operations. And we do that with military, civilian, and contractors totaling about 525 folks. So a global mission across a span of control for 46 DoD components with primarily a contractor force of 525 folks. So developing a cyberspace-ready force for the future is certainly a challenge for us. We certainly have challenges retaining, training, and recruiting those personnel. So I certainly think as I look at the event theme, developing our cyberspace workforce to meet current and future challenges, I certainly believe we all recognize the challenge that's in front of us. The nation has a severe shortage of cyber professionals. By some estimates, anywhere between 400,000 to 500,000 vacancies in that area. We certainly, once again, do recognize the challenge. But as General Nakasone recently laid out in his comments to Congress, two of his 5 priorities that he laid out, one being readiness is priority number 1. It is foundational to the success of operations and defense of the nation. And readiness certainly speaks to having that trained and ready workforce. He also talked about building a skilled workforce through recruitment, training, and retention. So as we speak today, I certainly look forward to hearing some ideas. As we all know, once ideas get out into the open, they have consequences. And I know we have to harness the power of partnership in order to solve this daunting task that we have in front of us. So I look forward to hearing your ideas as we speak later today about this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And our cleanup batter is Rear Admiral Michael Ryan, the former commander of Coast Guard Cyber Command. He was responsible for conducting operations and delivering efforts in and through the cyberspace operational domain. Today, he has moved to his new position, Deputy for Operations and Policies. In the past, using his C4IT specialty, Admiral Ryan commanded the Operations Systems Center with responsibility for software development and sustainment of enterprise information technology systems, something that General Stanton said this morning that's important to know as we go in this world. Prior to his current assignment was as the Assistant Commander for Capabilities, Coast Guard 7, with responsibilities for staffing, training, equipping, sustaining, maintaining, and employing the Coast Guard forces to meet the mission requirements, which we've been talking about this week. Building a qualified cyber force is not only a challenge for the joint services, but industry as well. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, General Lawrence. And, hey, always great to be in an AFCEA forum. Just an opportunity for us to bring that ecosystem of contributors together. I think we see that in the audience this morning, and we'll see it play out over the next couple days as General Stanton gave you our call to action. And not a better place to hold this particular training symposium than in really the bedroom of Army Cyber, who I think all would admit has led the way in this space in setting the standard, setting the pace, and really setting the expectations for what our nation needs as a joint force. So General Stanton, General Kraft, leave no doubt that we are here with purpose from a Coast Guard perspective because we do want to learn some more. We still want to connect and integrate even more fully so that as Coast Guard Cyber Command comes to bear and continues to evolve and mature our service and our workforce, that we're learning those lessons without the pain and consequence that many of our predecessors have already explored. So, I'm here in a little bit of a disingenuous role. So as a former Coast Guard Cyber Commander, I come to you with a little bit of literary license, almost like a limited liability corporation. I can say whatever I want. I can throw out markers and expectations, and my successor in the front row, Rear Admiral J. Vann, gets to pick that ball up and run with it. So, but I have no doubt that, we've got a great playbook. We've got a great purpose. And Coast Guard Cyber, is part of the joint force. And so we're going to continue to build off of those great foundations. We're coming to the party just a little bit late, but I think that there's distinct benefit from that. What I have said over my 3 years leading Coast Guard Cyber Command is I don't have to be creative in this arena. I just have to follow the playbook. The joint force has already gone through the trials and tribulations about how to establish the benchmarks. How do you create teams? How do you deal with this retention problem? How do you train so that our operators really can execute, whether it's defensive or offensive? And so we're doing that. General Nakasone called for us to be integrated, to generate force, to be ready, and ultimately to be postured to meet the needs of our nation. So that's been our mandate over the last 3 years of my tenure and throughout my predecessors' roles as well. And so, this is about being interoperable. My teams have to have the same capability, the same acumen, and the same drive that all the other services are committing to. And we're up for that challenge. Again, we're following the standards that have been set by U.S. Cyber Command, with a little bit of a tweak and some add-ons, that are appropriate, that come to me from the Department of Homeland Security and some of the broader mission space that we operate in. But ultimately, if you get the baselines right, we can do all of that. And so, I'm looking for how do you organize, train, and equip, looking to those Army examples. We're buying capability in the form of our deployable tool sets that the Marines and Fleet Cyber have already put in place. I'm buying off of their contracts to make sure that we're harnessing the power of industry and proven technology that we can bring to bear wherever and whenever I need to deploy my forces. And I'll talk a little bit about, where I see the uniqueness of the Coast Guard cyber terrain. It really comes down to the premise that, cyberspace is ubiquitous. I think we all can appreciate it is not bound by the physical time, speed, or distance constraints. It gives you full freedom of maneuver around the global commons, and you're only limited by the perimeters that you draw yourself and that our adversaries also get to exploit and explore. So, when I look at it from Homeland Security into Homeland Defense, that is a seamless transition. And if you think about a cyber attack that can arrive on our doorstep, each and every day, every hour, every minute, it doesn't really matter where we sit physically. You've got to be prepared. And how quickly can you pivot from being a Homeland Security cybersecurity incident into really becomes a, attack on our nation, the fabric of our citizens, and really the fundamentals of what the United States democracy is all about. General Nakasone gets that. He understands that, something that may emerge like the Colonial Pipeline cybersecurity incident could really put us at odds in a defensive posture in an offensive arena, against a nation-state adversary. And so the Coast Guard sits in that sweet spot. We operate there each and every day. We really, we share those same vulnerabilities, but more importantly, I think we understand a different segment of the United States. And you heard the Deputy for the National Cyber Director this morning talk about those critical infrastructure sectors. Those 16 really fundamental capabilities and areas that influence the livelihoods of our nation, that allow us to prosper economically and diplomatically and militarily. But bringing all of that together, the Coast Guard has sector risk management agency responsibilities to protect and defend in the maritime transportation arena. And I'll talk some more later on about why that's significant to our nation. But if you think about the energy grid, if you think about the financial sector, if you overlay in our Department of Energy equities, all of those things come together. And I think, as President Biden pointed out, maybe being that mythical red line, an attack into one of those areas, it really, really gets us close into a really heated conflict against an adversary, and maybe a nation state or otherwise. And so, from a Coast Guard cyber perspective, we operate in that continuum day in and day out. We have the appropriate legal authorities to allow us to work on the waterfront of our nation, that allow us to project globally, and I see some of our international partners in the audience here this morning as well. That's the world that the Coast Guard of your nation lives in. Being able to be a military service, to be able to operate with the interagency, to be a law enforcement entity, to have regulatory authority against a $5.4 trillion economic engine, within our maritime arena. So, I put up just one backdrop here that I won't talk to right now, but really helps to tie together in my own mind, how do we prevent cybersecurity incidents? How do we condition the maritime industry to understand their responsibilities and their equities? And then how do we have the maneuver forces that allow us to respond when attacked so that we can restabilize, recover, and demonstrate that resilience that our nation needs in a really, really foundational area that drives how we operate, how we live as a nation. So, look forward to exploring some of those concepts with you a little bit more, but I think all of the things that we do are complementary to what the Army has already demonstrated their prowess in, that all the other joint force elements bring to bear day in and day out, and we're committed to the cause as anybody else. So great to be here with you this morning, and look forward to entertaining some questions as well. Thanks, General.
Thank you, Admiral. And I wrote a note here because I looked out and saw our international partners here. So please stand. Thank you for being here. Tell us who you are and what country you're representing.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Pearson, and French liaison officer to the Cyber Control Officer.
Very good.
French.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Laurent Nishimura, General in Hawaii.
Yes.
I'm really also the cyber intervention.
Morning, everyone. I'm Captain Victor Vitu, and I'm a liaison officer at the AFCEA, and the AFCEA is very interesting. We participate in every particular responsibility about this very interesting.
Thank you. We got one more. Thank you. So, as you said last month, we were in TechNet Indo-Pacific, a great symposium. And I remembered Admiral Goutier, who's with the Coast Guard, gave an amazing presentation on the challenges that you all face. So I'm gonna take a moment to ask a personal question based on what I heard. So, Admiral Ryan, as highlighted in your cyber strategic outlook, the Coast Guard is responsible for defending critical infrastructure across 361 ports that make up our nation's maritime transportation system. How is the Coast Guard conditioning its forces to address such a massive problem set?
Yeah, thanks, General. And just to kind of build on those themes, again, this is about the marine transportation system, which drives over 90% of the commodities that show up on our doorstep, along with those that we export around the globe. It doesn't matter what flag that particular fleet element flies, except if it's a Russian-flagged vessel these days. We really are trying to facilitate the movement of cargoes safely and securely that arrives on one of those wharfs at the 361 ports of national economic security interest. This is about making sure that our nation can get the goods that it needs for its citizens and for its partners around the globe. And so the Coast Guard works in that arena day in and day out. We have regional commanders that understand the relationships on the waterfront. They deal day in and day out with the maritime industry, recognizing what are their corporate equities, what are their vulnerabilities, whether they be cyber or otherwise, and then hoping to galvanize, all of those entities into be a more safe and secure environment. And what we see a lot of times is, a lot of discussion about the information technology aspects of corporations. Those things that drive their back-end services that, as Joyce Carell talked about this morning, those mainstream things that, companies just make investments in. But in the cyber arena, it's much broader than that. So we understand, if a corporation's email service gets compromised by ransomware or something else and that disrupts their business functions, that's going to have a tremendous impact. But if they're operational technology, those instruments that operate in moving cargo on the waterfront, the cranes on the wharf, the integrated propulsion system or navigation capabilities on those vessels, all of those things provide special challenge. I'll just share, one example. Real world, the things that our Coast Guard regional commanders deal with day in and day out. So we had a major maritime industry company report a ransomware attack against their email service. And it disabled, their ability to communicate across both their fleet and their corporation at large. What that really translated for us in the maritime was operational risk. And so as that company's vessels were transiting some of our most hazardous waterways, it becomes a security issue. And it became, an element where our Coast Guard leadership said, hey, we think that, yes, the company characterized it as a minor cybersecurity incident that disrupted their business activities, but they can't explicitly tell us because they didn't know their cyber terrain intimately. How did that bleed over into their afloat population? Did it disrupt some of their capabilities on their vessels' bridges? Could it have allowed adversary access to the propulsion or buoyancy systems on board a particular vessel? And in this case, a number of those vessels are transiting in close proximity to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, which in the mid-Atlantic region is a major thoroughfare for economic activity and waterborne conveyance. And so our Coast Guard captain of the port, in his regulatory capacity, imposed some additional operational controls that said, okay, vessel, you can transit, but you're going to bring some tugs in there as some external measures of security to reduce that risk profile that allowed his comfort level to be a little bit greater to protect things that were really, really important. Because if that vessel had gone aground, if that vessel had hit one of those major arteries and disrupted, not only the maritime streams, but some significant thoroughfares for, our fleet of trucks that maneuver around this nation as well, all of that would have really been catastrophic, in that particular region. So we're training our operators to understand that. And what that sector commander also did was he requested a cyber protection team to come in and provide additional perspective and guidance that he didn't have organically within his force. But I think that's what we see across the joint force. We roll in specialized capability, quickly understand what's emerging, provide great counsel or operational capability, and help to sustain the things that are important to our nation. So, we're doing that day in and day out, around our continental United States, but also projecting internationally because other countries have those same concerns, and we need that measure of equilibrium across the maritime zone around the world. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Admiral. I know our Homeland Security Committee for AFCEA International, I recently met with them, and I really want them to hone in on the challenges of our ports and overall SCADA is where I see our biggest threat as we go forward. We really do want to hear from the audience, so if you could put our sign back up, askmecerts@gmail.com. Have we got any questions, sir, from our audience?
Thank you so much. Yes, we have quite a few questions, and I wanted to let everybody know also that if we have questions asked during the live event, we'll be forwarded to the speakers and have every opportunity to be answered. And here's the first question. We have heard several of the joint leaders have started using the phrase, fight the network, or network is a weapon system. What are 3 things that really change with us with using those operational terms versus operating and maintaining the network, and what are the education and training implications?
You've had some experience there, sir. Would you like to take that one?
Yeah, so I think one of the, I don't know that I can bin it in a group of 3, but I think, our networks are now a war-fighting platform, and so it's not just, hey, we now have an outage. It's, what does that outage truly mean, and how can we recover from it? How can we work around it? How do we, with that warfighter mentality, engage that enemy, that outage, if you will, in such a way that we restore the capability, or we at least restore our connectivity through another mechanism. And it does require quite a different shift from what I would call a commercial entity providing generic IT services, because what's riding over those lines are extremely sensitive or warfighting capable, warfighting necessary elements to service our troops, whether it's intelligence or direct fires or the full gambit of the mention, right? But and it's been a shift over the last couple of decades, right? We have stood up, actually, JFHQC Doden, right? Prior to Doden, I would say that we weren't necessarily operating our networks as a warfighting platform. That it was not it was more of an office-based service that would get will get around to you based on some level of service level agreement. But it was really sort of the instantiation of Doden and those DACO authorities that got us into more of a warfighting mentality. So maybe. Yeah, Mr. Foster.
Yes, certainly jump in as well. Yeah, so as we know, cyberspace as a warfighting domain is only about 12 years old. So when it first was stood up as a warfighting domain, we took a lot of cryptologists and some commos or signals officers or whatever you want to call them, depending on service, and we kind of cobbled them together and said, voila, do cyber, right? And they did a tremendous job, getting us to where we are, advancing us. But we certainly have to change the mentality where we're growing up folks who are cyberspace operators and understand cyberspace as actual warfighting domain. And to that I mean, with all the elements of defensive cyberspace operations that you would use in any other domain, channelizing the enemy, surprise, deception, et cetera, et cetera. And when I talk about fighting the Doden, analogous to remember the movie Home Alone. If cybersecurity is more like us when we, at nighttime we kind of lock the doors and put the alarm on and go to sleep. And defensive cyberspace operations is more like, I think it's Macaulay Culkin, is that his name? Yeah. Where he's actually defending the home, right? He's got, different things out there that are actually defending the dome, being more operational in mindset and focus. So it's certainly a mindset shift, and that's certainly where we can partner with partners like academia to where we can say, hey, we need you to train folks who understand our problem set, who understand the DoD way, or at least defensive cyberspace operations to that level, so we can recruit and retain those folks who are ready to walk in and help us solve that problem.
Anyone else?
So a couple things. See if I hit. I think the threat is the first thing that drove the change. The threat to the networks and who is the threat. When I talk about fight, I often refer to as fighting the installations. So if you think to the Commandant's stand-in force concept, and that you have Marines and essentially bases and stations, expeditionary advanced bases inside weapons and engagement zones, you have to be able to fight for those installations. Because those installations, just being back at Camp Lejeune or Camp Pendleton, right? I mean, you have to think about force generation, mobilization of forces, and deployment of forces. And if you can't do those things as a base commander, then you're not helping the force that's forward. And so, the adversary is going to try to do the same thing that we are, right? Set conditions. So when you think about that as critical terrain, you think about the threat, where it's located, then that will drive you to a different culture and a different mindset that has to exist. And then there's also the training, right? How many of our base commanders go through training that talks about fighting the network? Right? That again, I'll go back to it's commander's business. Garrison networks don't belong just to commos, communications officers, right? They belong to the commander. And that's where I get into I get a little passionate about fighting the installations, because you're not going to have the time.
Right. Next question, sir.
For MG Heritage, what is the level of hiring fracticide you see in Maryland among the services, and how does this impact mission and knowledge growth? Thank you.
All right, who's been
Was that planted?
No, who's been to Fort Meade? How many have been to Fort Meade? All right, it's 170. Is it 175 is out the main gate? And then there's a row of barbershops. I won't throw out any names of the barbershops. What billboard is right in front of the barbershop where I go and everybody else goes, though I don't need to go as often? It's a company offering, I think, a $70,000 or $85,000 signing bonus. And a Tesla. So yes, the competition is there. For MAR4 Cyber, it is a challenge. I think all the services will say. However, where we sit today, our retention is okay. It's pretty good. I would argue the difference to the Tesla and the $85,000, whatever, is really the mission and the culture that we bring, whether you're on the offensive side, whether you're conducting DODAN operations or DCO. That is the focus for me and my sergeant major, and making sure that that's first and foremost. But again, there are challenges. We do have to compete, whether it's at the accessions or on the retention side. Like everybody else, talent management is critical. I mentioned in my opening comments, the Commandant of the Marine Corps published his talent management initiative for 2030. And so we are looking at extending service obligations at the conclusion of some of the NSA and Cyber Command required training is one. There are skill bonuses that are assigned as the Marines level up in their training and qualifications. We are talking about, PCS orders and how do we take care of those. Things like formalizing the MOS, right? Creating a influence maneuver MOS, and now formalizing, codifying that, really helps set a defined career path per se for the operators. So that helps. On the civilian side, and this is something I had in recent testimony, continue to advocate for extended bonuses for our civilians. Some of our best operators are civilians. So how do we incentivize those? We use the recruiting, retention, and relocation incentives to the max. There isn't a penny left over at the end of the year in order to affect that. So those are some of the incentives and challenges associated.
Yeah, we all face that, but I'm going to go take a look at that billboard. I want to go back, General Adams. You introduced the opportunity to stand up a new command with Space Command, and how is that working and how is that affecting us? We're all looking for those talented individuals. What has that done to the Air Force team?
It's a great question. So the Space Force, I guess we started with a Space Command, and then the last administration decided we're going to move forward with a Space Force. Now, this is different than the Netflix series Space Force that I'm sure you all are fans of. But this Space Force is a very lean service. It is comprised of, and we're growing to about 18,000 folks. Right now we're probably sitting around 10. And I think it's going to give us some great advantages. One, I'll give you a quick 101 about the Space Force. It's first that it's only going to be 3 enlisted AFCEAs, or our specialty codes. That's going to be in cyber operations, intel, and also space operations. So those will be the 3 entities that we have that are going to be developed. On the officer side, it's going to be 6. It'll include space operations, intel, and cyber, but also acquisitions, engineering, and astronauts occasionally when we have those. So that's going to be like the composition of the workforce that we have. all of the rest of the support that's going to come from for the Space Force is going to come from the Air Force. So all the base operations, there'll still be airmen at space bases doing that work, but there will be a space garrison leader or a base commander that will be a Space Force service member that will be leading that. But all the rest of that support will come from the Air Force. So we're in partnership with them, and I think while any service can contribute to the Space Force, and early on we had people from the Army, Navy, and Marines that transferred into the Space Force, the majority of that force is coming from the Air Force. We're in negotiation right now with cyber and intel, and that's where you see the strain is that inside the Air Force, for our field grade officers, we are 360 in a deficit in a bathtub because of force shaping opportunities. When we needed to decrease our force structure size, a lot of those folks we kind of carved into these year groups. So we're already seeing a deficit there, coupled with the same challenges that everybody else is having about workforce training and people leaving and going and taking other jobs. And then additionally, the Space Force, when they're asking, of course, they want to build a diverse force. So now they're targeting the limited diversity that we already have as well inside the Air Force because they want to start out with a diverse force. And in some of those areas like space operations, they're not getting it. Engineers, they're not getting it. So they're coming to Intel and Cyber and asking us. And all of this is managed under General O'Brien, these two career fields. So we're seeing that strain and pull, on the service as well. The one thing that's beneficial about the Space Force is that as they're going to Congress and asking for new things, the one thing they're asking for that may be helpful for all of the services is to not to have a separate, kind of guard and reserve force. What they want to do is be able to move seamlessly into the guard, back to active duty, or into the reserve force and back to active duty without your time even changing or without your status even changing. So all the different statuses that that you have that's complex, they're actually going to Congress to try to do a pilot or a test to see if they can just have one status and we can move those people. That will give them a lot of flexibility that they don't have right now, and also flexibility for all the other services if it works out. The Space Force will not present any cyber protection teams. We have a concept called mission defense teams, if you've heard of that. Those teams were service retained only capability. It's not part of the COF memo as of now, but an MDT would look at the key cyber terrain of any air set or space air set. So all the Space Force systems from ground base to space base, to be able to look at that key terrain, to understand it, and also in some ways to provide some defense for it that we would do. So that's how we're looking at, in some ways, operationalizing, the key space terrain that we have, using mission defense teams to be able to do that, and using the intel folks to help cue them on where they need to go and look. But we have seen a lot of challenges trying to give them what they need and also retain, what we need in the Air Force. But it's a key partnership, and we look forward to continue working with the Space Force to help develop them out in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a challenge. Do we have another question from the audience?
Developing puzzles and assessing puzzle solutions are not skills historically inherent to the DoD. How do we find, hire, and retain the necessary talent? What companies work in this space?
You introduced the puzzles, didn't you?
I did introduce the puzzles. Yeah. So you're right. It's not something that we typically we typically build, but I think our workforce is going to require this over the next couple of decades. So there, I guess I'll start with how do we find them, right? We find them with various assessment tools out there, right? And there are a number of companies that have produced a number of assessment tools. We in the Department of Defense, I think we're we rely a lot on the ASFAB, right, for that initial piece, and then we work into and certainly in the cyber arena, we have an assessment battery called the CNAB that works. But each service is also kind of working their own elements and sometimes experiments. I know when I was with Army Cyber for a little while, they were looking at a number of things, and maybe General Stanton knows more. We can talk to him later, but the vast majority of the defense architecture is not necessarily yet geared for looking for the puzzle solvers just yet. But really, it's about introducing these puzzles, right? NSA has a unique recruiting mechanism where they do have some websites available that actually walk you through a series of puzzles, and if you get so far, they actually start to talk to you. I think we need a similar approach in a lot of cases, and then attracting that talent. I think we have a whole panel tomorrow with Mr. Panyas about how we recruit, retain, and that talent. So I'll save some of my powder for that one, but it really is about giving opportunity, building these puzzle solvers, and then giving the opportunity to go solve challenging puzzles. Right? It may not be that we keep them in a specific OC code or specific work role for 8, 9, 10 years. It is we give them the opportunity to go solve other challenges and other puzzles across the force. Sometimes in uniform, sometimes out of uniform. I really like the idea of especially being a reservist, being able to come in and out, right? And my entire several decades long career now, that's always been talked about. How can we go seamlessly from active to reserve to active? Go do work with industry. Come back to active. How can we blend all of that together? Right now, all of our pay and personnel systems do not support that, right? But we need to work those challenges to get the right people. So we take the puzzle solvers and we get them in the right place to go solve puzzles. To generate them, right? I will take my Sudoku experience, right? So I've got a phone app for Sudoku. A year or so ago, I was terrible at Sudoku, right? But now, a year later, after doing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of those things a day, the thing is only sending me the expert puzzles now, which is a little time consuming. But I've gotten really good at it. And that's what we need our workforce to be doing is being given constant little puzzles that they then can turn into becoming really good at what it is they're doing. Hopefully part of that's part of their day job, right? But hopefully we're also inspiring them to do that as part of their professional development writ large. And I think if we find the right incentive structure and make it as easy as possible, that can be done. As far as the companies doing this sort of thing, I think there's maybe a handful out there, and I know some of you are out there. And I don't know if I should list anybody because I'm going to accidentally leave somebody out. But it's not just the not just the DIB or defense industrial base, the common contractors, but it's also a whole lot of other commercial oriented vendors. And so I think I'm going to leave it at that unless you guide me otherwise. So
I'm only at the hard level. I haven't taken the leap to expert yet. So anybody else like to comment on how we're doing that in training?
I'll jump on one. Having just come from a little on the recruiting side, which, by the way, recruiting in COVID.
My God.
Go visit your local recruiter and tell them thanks, because that was a heck of a challenge. But when you talk about technology and how do you assess, how do you identify those? Under the talent management program initiative that Commandant's put out there is putting an investment behind AI, right? How do you identify those young men and women, while they're in their junior, senior high school or college, that have that propensity for what you need. So it is immediately getting the round peg to the round hole. Right now, it's still, call it industrial. So several screenings along the way. Recruiter gets a mission, he's going to get that mission, and then as that individual works their way through the pipeline and eventually shows up at my front doors, then again we're putting the right person into the right position to hopefully then accelerate any of that training and get right onto mission. We need to do the same thing for civilians.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. I would just say that arguably cyberspace is a more complex domain than the other warfighting domains, but I will push back on the premise that the DoD or our service members aren't puzzle solvers. I would actually, there's something in the Marine Corps we call Lance Corporal Ingenuity, and I got a war story about how I saved my butt one day, but I won't go into that one. But certainly we do have problem solvers. It may be a paradigm shift in terms of how we look at cyber in order to get them there, and then it comes back down to what the Admiral said, reps and sets, in order to make them SMEs and experts, at their job. But I certainly would once again push back on that premise. But yeah, more training, more reps and sets.
Very good. Next question, sir.
Given the commanders must conduct war fighting from their post, base, or station locations, how does industry, as a service, contracts such as networks, cloud, etc., measure up to meet all service level agreements to allow commanders to exercise command and control?
I'm going to go down to our admiral there, who really has the challenge.
Yeah, so I think our cyber terrain is changing. It is expanding without bounds. So this notion that we cultivate our own environment and you secure the perimeter and that really is your focal point, that's not the case. And industry, is delivering great capabilities and opening up new opportunities that allow the government and the joint force to be more capable, expanding into the cloud, bringing in new algorithms, bringing in new technologies that, give us more functional capability, but from a defensive posture and really understanding, where your perimeters are, it really becomes a little more nebulous. And so we capture it within the Coast Guard as anywhere that Coast Guard data exists, that's cyber terrain for us. And I may not have all necessarily the same tools in each of those environments, but I definitely carry the same responsibility. And so that engagement with industry, contractual, acquisition-wise, but also from an understanding perspective, helps to set that theater, that we need them to build security in on the front end of their environments. We need them to not cut costs to the detriment of security as they're building new capabilities, to not rush products to the marketplace that aren't tried and tested against, even the most cursory vulnerabilities that ultimately become a risk proposition for our nation. And so that's a collective partnership. Part of it is through messaging, but expectations management. And, always my outreach to industry says, hey, do this right. We need to have evolved already to avoid those pitfalls of the past, understand that we're going to have an interfaced and interlaced cyber environment. I won't be able to just stay within my own Coast Guard enclave. I'm going to have to operate in those other reaches of the technology arena, but I'm incumbent and dependent upon industry to have done their part. And I think we also see the emergence of the intelligence and information sharing expectations. If the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is going to be responsible to ensure that not only the federal government environments are secure, but then also having a vested interest in giving actionable insights out to, the major players and other stakeholders in the technology arena, we've got to give them something they can work with. And that means either, declassifying information or reading them in appropriately, but this has got to be a continued growth in that partnering arrangement because we are dependent upon one another for our mutual success.
General Heritage?
I would just add, and this comes up in a couple other forums, is it's not obviously just all about the hardware and the software, obviously key component, but don't deliver one thing that just one piece of kit that just does one thing. And I think you alluded to it, the Admiral alluded to it, is it has to support all warfighting functions because that's what a base or station inside, acting as a expeditionary advanced base is going to be required to do. And so if it just does one thing, then it's not not as helpful.
General Adams, as the Military Deputy Director of Concepts and Special Assistant for Cyber Effects, what keeps you awake at night?
Let's see. So from the Air Force side, it is a resource drill. We're finding that we have probably over $400 million of tech debt that we have just in some of our critical systems. And so the Secretary is looking at how we're going to, get out of this tech debt. One of the things that we were looking to do was Enterprise IT as a Service as one option that will be able to offload some of that tech debt if we gave that to private industry, and then all the upgrades that we needed for the future success would come from the private industry. In my last job previous to this one, I was the commander of Joint Base Charleston. So I've seen it from a installation commander perspective about what do you need on the ground to be effective versus an enterprise answer that may be coming from the Pentagon. And those two things, as you know, will conflict depending on time and speed that you need to execute said mission. And in every base that we have across the Air Force and also the Space Force have different mission requirements that we will need industry to respond to. But it is in some ways, as we looked at the strategy, what's going on as we transition from competition to campaigning in the new National Defense Strategy, is that what I remind our team is to be mindful of having so many requirements that's levied upon the threats that we see coming from our frenemies that we have, and how we respond to those could continue to increase and pose cost on us. And in some ways, that was a strategy we had with the Cold War as well, right? And so what we're trying to do is just be mindful of all the changes that we see coming, down the line. It harkens back to, if you all have seen the Jake, the Admiral has a slide that talks about Lancers. Has anybody seen this that he presents? And it's just a reminder, right? In this picture, if you haven't seen it, it says that, beginning the transition of World War I, that these team of Lancers, were holding their Lancers, but they had rifles on their backs, the weapons, right? We're transitioning from having Lancers as a tool to win wars and now having, guns to be able to fight. And they went into battle with their Lancers and all would perish because they had this new technology on their back, but they weren't using it. And so this was a reminder that with new technology we have with artificial intelligence, how does that play into the fight? With using inside the Air Force is a question about that I ask, are we balanced for the future fight? And I ask this all the time because that tech debt, the only way we're going to get out of some of that is we challenge our thinking of some of the stable platforms that we have in the air that we use. Are we going to be willing to give up some count of those platforms to be able to pay our way out of the tech debt? And if not, we're not going to be able to compete with our adversaries if we don't. And that's the fundamental question that the Secretary is wrestling with right now is, what do I give up to be able to pay for a better future, a more stable future? Our service chief is even asking the question, how many pilots do I need versus cyber warriors do I need in the future, right? And so in Air Force Futures, that's one of the tasks that we received is, how does the future fight look? And do we have the right manpower and the right equipment to win in that future fight? And so those are the challenges that we struggle with. Of course, and he's the one, and he's also said that he thinks that, one day there could be a cyber warrior as a chief of staff, right? He's even thrown that out there too. So our chief has evolved to that point of thinking that way. Now as we went into the Secretary with our list of task order tasks that we had, he added in, before he signed it, was now go and educate the leaders of the Air Force about cyber and cybersecurity. So our Secretary knows that we have to get our senior leaders educated, and in some ways that's going to start with the airmen in our schoolhouses, not just in the cyber schoolhouse that we have, but in other functional communities, right? Everybody's going to need. This goes back to the conversation today about the few, the many, and all. What type of curriculum and education should we start giving in every functional area about cybersecurity? And so those are some of the challenges that we're working with today. Those are the opportunities that we have with this new secretary and the new chief of staff that I think we're going to be, at least we're asking the right questions today. Let's see what answers we get back and see how we're able to execute those.
Great, thank you. Another question, sir?
With the recent events in the Ukraine, we have witnessed a significant change in how modern warfare is fought using drones, rapidly deployed LEO satellites, and continued cyber attacks. How do we decrease our response time to attacks on critical infrastructure?
Yeah, I'll take a first cut at this. And so, I'm not sure that we're going to see the ability to decrease the attacks. It really becomes more about resilience and recovery. And we need to propagate those premises not only across our joint force and our government systems, but out into those critical infrastructure sectors that I talked about. We saw, a coalition of the willing in cyber arena launch attacks against Russia. That crowdsourcing of cyber attacks. Well, what if that same approach was lobbied against the United States? Again, you don't get to control the actions of your adversary. What you have to be able to do is understand their intent, hopefully have a degree of understanding of their capability, be able to appropriately posture your forces to either prevent that or respond. And maybe that response is a prevention action in and of itself. But I think that it's the wholesale fabric of warfighting. You've got to be prepared to engage on your own terms as much as to be able to respond to what your adversary's actions might be as well. So I think we get to control part of the puzzle, but not all of it. But there are some more distinguished warfighters here on the panel that can talk about that as well.
So I'd say a big piece of that is intel, right? I think it's probably going to start there, is on intel. Who's gathering it, how they're gathering it, and who they're passing it to. With their international partners here, industry, private organizations out there. How is that intelligence then shared, in real time and hopefully before the attacks. Then I think, obviously censoring is key, right? So if I talk just about our own networks, weapons, platforms, again, starting with the intel, and then putting the sensors out is obviously a key part. And then obviously the links from there, whether it's data and then again how you share and how you analyze it, are all critical. And then there's the acquisition piece. It starts with there, and this came up a little bit in Admiral Ryan's comments. It's got to start with the security's got to be built in, right? For any new capability that's going out there, it's got to have that defensive mechanism built in, the cybersecurity built in. But have we talked about the ability to spoof? Have we talked about any deception capabilities built into that sort of those platforms? That's where the mines we need to go and start from there. And then obviously we got a lot of catch up to do. Right, we're still dealing with legacy systems. Marine Corps Commandant's invested heavily in this network modernization program. I don't necessarily agree with the term modernization because it's not the mindset that we're after. But I mean, getting rid of those legacy systems, right, and upgrading as quickly as we can. Prioritization, again, being driven by the threat and the intel.
And then I would add that you're going to need rapidly available, ready talent to go bring everything there to bear, right, to solve these things, these problems, because it's hard for us to predict what the next future fight is. I think there's a little glimpse that we're seeing in Russia, Ukraine, but back in the early days, we didn't have these things called mobile phones. When mobile phones came online, they became an opportunity and a challenge in the security realm. And since then we've moved on to cloud, and those have also become an opportunity and challenge. So you really going to need agile, talented workforce in order to be able to adjust to whatever it is that we see on the battlefield at the time. Ready, available, agile, and talented.
The only thing I would build on what General Heritage said in terms of getting left of the attack would be the responsibility. That's directly the functionality of intelligence primarily to get left of the attack, whether that's getting out in red space and gray space to anticipate, analyze, and kind of give some forewarning in that area. We also rely heavily on commercial threat intelligence which is available and out there. And I know I'll tell you that my analysts say they cannot do it without it. So in addition to all the Title 50 reporting that they get, they certainly say that the supplementation they get through CTI is very, very important. And I would just say in terms of a response action, once there actually is an attack on critical infrastructure, there's certainly a gap we need to explore as well. If we're talking about ICS SCADA or OT systems, the level of competence that we have for our maneuver forces to be able to react and respond and clear is certainly something that we need to focus on and develop a workforce that's ready for that as well.
Yeah, and one thing I say on the air side we're doing, and this is the long play to get at this, is trying to develop the information warfare airman or guardian. So if you know, the term guardian is used to describe the Space Force if you didn't know. But so information warfare. So what we're trying to do, we've created a developmental category for promotions and several other opportunities where Intel, Cyber, OSI, and also a few others. Some of them fit in well, but weather is part of it, and public affairs. Those peripherals are coming together to try to determine what do we need from an information warfare standpoint to be able to take some of the lessons learned from each one of those career fields and now try to create an information warfare airman or guardian. Those are some of the long-term things that we're doing, as trying to create and roll out curriculum for those folks, cross-sharing jobs at our development teams. When we're trying to pick commanders, now we're looking at some of those folks from Intel taking cyber position, some of those folks from OSI bringing them into the career field. So we're looking at all those things to try to develop, information warrior.
I think we have time for one more question, if there's one available.
Yes, this is our final question. How does DISA incentivize lifelong learning for our civilian workforce, and how do we facilitate continuous education and development while conducting a continuous mission?
Was the question DISA?
Just DISA.
Go on.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. So just to clarify, so General Skinner is the director of DISA, and he's also the commander of Joint Force Headquarters Doden. But that is the only commonality that we have between the agency and the military command. So he is the only dual-headed individual in there. So probably not the best person to speak to DISA and continuous learning and so forth, other than us being a tenant in their building. So unfortunately, I cannot. And that's all often conflated and confused. But we're not the same.
Yeah, but I'm going to go right.
So I was going to just on civilian workforce learning writ large. I mean, this is part of the talent management, something that we're jumping on as well as So how do you get your civilian workforce additional certifications? How do you get that just like you would for Marines? How do you get them to PME school? How do you get them certification? Do you let them take time off again? Let them take time off to get an additional degree, and then they come back into that position that they held before. So working through all those through HR and again advocating for as many of the civilian workforce incentives and programs. DoD CIO is the one that held the budget before, and it's escaping me, but it drives through those 3 R's, the name of that the pool of money. But again, it's using all of that, and then obviously they'll use the money for what they want.
Right.
But yeah, civilian workforce development, learning, absolutely. And there's a lot of advantages Cyber Command employees will take with what NSA offers as well. So that's I've seen that happen locally as well.
Right.
Yeah. I will add that for Joint Force Headquarters Student, for our civilians that we do have there, as far as the 8570 or 8140 certification requirements, there is resources for that training. So unlike a lot of areas throughout the department, my understanding is that a lot of times that is not resourced correctly. So I know that DISA does resource that, and that is available. So that definitely contributes to their CEUs and ability to get those certifications for lifelong learning. So just want to add that.
Right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule. For those of you that had flight issues and had to drive in the middle of the night, we really thank you. So very much appreciated. Please let's recognize this great panel.
Great job, teammates.
Please welcome General Fredenberg back to the stage to formally thank them on behalf of AFCEA and our audience.
Nice. Some dancing.
Oh, my goodness. All right, well, Generals Lawrence, Heritage, Adams, and Admirals Ryan, Donald, and Mr. Foster, thank you. This is a challenge, as you've all clearly laid out here today. As we operationalize the cyber domain and fight in this domain, there are a specific, and the change, it doesn't stop in this domain. So there are some conditions here that are different, they're new, and they're challenging. And getting the right skill set in our workforce to be able to do those things. And not only for the Department of Defense, but I would argue that this is a challenge for our nation. There are businesses out there that are under attack and dealing with the same challenges. And so I appreciate the comments and the insights and the discussion we had here today. And ladies and gentlemen, this is just the beginning. There are going to be other panels and speakers that are going to be talking about this from the industry perspective, from the military perspective, we've heard some government perspectives here today. So this is a worthy challenge to pick up for our national security. On behalf of, in lieu of a speaker gift, we will provide a donation to the Fisher House on behalf of all of you. So thank you very much for that panel. And as our panel members are going to depart here, but before we wrap this session up, we're going to have a special presentation from AFCEA Augusta and Fort Gordon chapter. So please just hold on and pay attention to the narrator. Thank you.
This year, the AFCEA Augusta Fort Gordon chapter decided to establish a new Teachers Award in honor of an educator that has had a profound impact on this region. This award, in honor of Dr. Sandra Caraway, is designed to recognize the generational impact Dr. Caraway had on the educational system in this region, the students, the teachers, and the community as a whole. Dr. Caraway served her entire adult life as an educator, concluding a 36-year career in education as a Columbia County School Superintendent, where she served from 2013 to 2021. In that capacity, Dr. Caraway provided vision, strategic leadership, and an unwavering commitment to her workforce, her students, and the community she loves in order to ensure the K-12 education in this region served as a force multiplier and worthy of the Army's investment. I'd like to ask Dr. Caraway to come forward along with Colonel Retired Sam Anderson, who will describe the history of this award.
Wake up, well I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah I know I'm gonna be.
Good morning. It's still morning. I'm going to apologize in advance. One of the many things that's happened to me in retirement is my eyes have gone bad. I forgot my glasses. I had to borrow one of my coworkers, and they don't exactly look great on me, but I'm going to give it my best shot here. So again, I don't know if I can do this or not. I am Sam Anderson. I'm the Executive Vice President for Soft Tax Solutions. And in the last 2 years, I've served as the Vice President of the Augusta Fort Gordon AFCEA chapter. I spent 28 years in the Army, and the last 5 years of my career, I was fortunate enough to be stationed here in Augusta, where I was able to meet and work with some pretty incredible people in this community. And it really is my honor to get to talk about one of those people today. But before I do that, I think it's important to talk about, the why we're even having a CERTS. The Department of Army decision in 2013 to move Army Cyber Command to Fort Gordon really was a watershed moment for this entire region. It was a decision that transformed the area into a cybersecurity industry hub with an exponential population growth impact, a $2 billion impact to the economy, and it also contributed to 2 separate townships in this region being selected as a top place to live in Georgia. And all those things were critical strategic imperatives for the Army to generate and recruit the kind of talent that this exquisite workforce requires. But those things didn't happen by chance. They were the result of strategic leadership on and off the installation with an engaged and supportive community that not only made this area attractive to the Army, but also attractive to that talent pool that we so desperately needed, both at Fort Gordon and the other national missions that are in this area, such as Savannah Riverside. And there are a lot of people, some of the people in this room, that made this possible. Elected officials at the state, federal, and local level, chambers of commerce, military leaders, nonprofits, they all played a significant role in establishing the foundation for this unprecedented opportunity that this community now has. In Sam Anderson's humble opinion, there was one individual that has not received the same level of attention for their impact. But in the opinion of the chapter, and me personally, they probably were the most important individual in making this idea come to fruition, and that person is Dr. Sandra Caraway. As mentioned, she served her entire adult life as an educator, 36-year career in Columbia County School System, where she served as the superintendent from 2013 to 2021. And in that capacity, Dr. Caraway provided vision, strategic leadership, and an unwavering commitment to her workforce, her students, and the community she loves in order to ensure K-12 education in this region served as a force multiplier for this mission and for the Army's investment. Most Americans make decisions on where they choose to reside based off the quality of life and the safety and well-being of their children. Quality education is at the heart of most of those decisions, and service members and government civilians are no different. The school system, the education system in Columbia County under Dr. Caraway's leadership achieved national level prominence, including schools ranked in the top 10% of all public schools in the nation. She personally engaged the Army Cyber Command workforce to inform them of the opportunities in this school system. And when the military sought to develop a high school cyber program, Dr. Caraway not only served as a board member on the Alliance for Cybersecurity Education, but she also took decisive steps to develop a cyber pathway in the high school system and support a Cyber Patriot program that has now achieved national prominence. As I mentioned earlier, spending 28 years in the Army exposed me to some of the most gifted and inspirational leaders our country has produced. And I've been fortunate to work with some of the people that you might know as household names now: McChrystal, McCraven, Fogarty, to name a few. With that as a background, I can say that I personally do not believe I have met a more effective, inspirational, and selfless leader in my lifetime than Dr. Sandra Caraway. Watching her lead was a graduate-level understanding in organizational leadership. She represents everything that is great about our nation and the educators that serve the fabric of our society. So considering this, the Fort Gordon AFCEA chapter has created a grant in Dr. Caraway's name to be awarded annually for the educator in this region that best reflects the character, ideals, and leadership of Dr. Caraway while supporting and advancing cyber-related education opportunities. We will recognize these award winners annually at the annual AFCEA Search Conference, and in doing so, continue to promote world-class education while honoring the memory of one of this community's most influential and impactful leaders. Dr. Caraway, I want to thank you personally and on behalf of AFCEA and this entire community on your lifetime of service and leadership. You will continue to be an inspiration for a generation of students, and your Bill Walsh coaching tree of educators will continue to lead by your example. So thank you. So, I'm going to ask General Stanton to come up here, but as he's coming up here, I also would like to formally recognize Ms. Carrie McWalters, if you could come forward, as the first recipient of the Dr. Caraway Leadership Award from AFCEA, an educator from Aiken County. She gets them early, and I know that General Stanton talked about this morning that we've got to get to the left of the boom on the education front, and I believe that she is teaching at the first grade level, so that's when we need to start talking to these kids, and she is exactly what we need to be getting after the problem. So congratulations.
So I get to call an audible of sorts, and I'm going to double down on Sam's comments through my own personal example. So all three of my children are graduates of the Columbia County school system. Well, one in about 2 weeks. Knock on wood. He's knocking it out of the park. But personal stories. So Dr. Caraway may or may not remember the line of emails that she got from me after I went and attended a Board of Education meeting to ask for a reevaluating of kids transferring into the area with their AP scores. The state of Georgia was not accounting for the AP credits in determining class rank. Now, instead of years' worth of deliberation, Dr. Caraway made that happen in a matter of months, and directly translated into the well-being of many of our children that are continuing to matriculate through Columbia County schools. I only offer that anecdote as clear evidence of my own personal example and what it means for, ma'am, you to lead and drive change. Thank you for all of your efforts. And, ma'am, congratulations on being the inaugural recipient of the Dr. Caraway Award. That's absolutely fantastic. On behalf of myself, Command Sergeant Major Quintero, the Cyber Center of Excellence, and Fort Gordon, let me please offer you just a very small token of a certificate of appreciation in our command coin.
An educator always has something to say. I'm so deeply honored, and let me just say that the United States of America is the land of the free, the home of the brave, the shining light on the hill. And it couldn't be that without two very important organizations or institutions, strong, expert armed forces, and a strong, expert education system. My dad loved his service as a chief warrant officer. He talked about it until he passed at just shy of 92. And I still talk about my career in education. And I just commend every one of you for what you do for our country, from the first grade teachers to the people who give their life to our nation. Thank you, General, Colonel Anderson, Christy, for all that you do, and all of you as well. I'm so deeply honored, and I just wish I had recorded all that so my family could hear it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Please welcome General Fredenberg back to the stage.
All right, we're going to do a quick audible, and I know that we're kind of holding everybody up for lunch, so we'll get this started very quickly. But, we've just recognized all the education that goes on for our K through 12 students, and it's only right we now transition and start looking beyond that. So at this time, we've got Mr. Dr. Kevin Floyd, Associate Dean of the Professor for the School of Computing for the Middle Georgia State University, and from Georgia Southern University, George L. Frederick, Colonel, Retired Director of Military Veteran Services. The Department of Defense and the nation are facing an increasingly competitive and congested and contested cyber and electromagnetic spectrum area. As such, the need for relationship building and collaborative engagements and fully fledged partnerships are vital among the U.S. institutions. It is with this in mind that we would formally recognize the formation of such partnerships between the Cyber Center of Excellence and two outstanding academic institutions within the United States systems of Georgia, Middle Georgia State University and Georgia Southern University. Today, the memorandums of understanding signed between the Cyber Center of Excellence and both the Middle Georgia State and Georgia Southern will seek to expand upon our soldiers' continuing education options by affording them the opportunity to enroll into Bachelor of Science and Information Technology programs with a curriculum that aligns with their military occupation and specialties. Students at both Georgia Southern and Middle Georgia will have the opportunity to learn from and conduct research with cyber and IT professionals. In addition, these memorandums of agreement commit each of the signing parties to more regular engagements with one another to explore additional areas of collaboration, support students and faculty attendance and or participating in affiliated conferences and symposiums, provide assistance in curriculum development at the institution's directions, provide great instructors and speakers during courses and seminars, and support efforts to support technology and cyber teaching and learning throughout Georgia. At this time, George L. Frederick, Colonel, Retired Director of Military Veterans Services and of Georgia Southern University, and Brigadier General Paul Stanton, the Commanding General of Cyber Center of Excellence, will sign the Memorandum of Understanding.
Hey, you know it's official when it comes in a folder like this with a Sign Here tab. Don't go anywhere without it. Let me just say on behalf of the Cyber Center of Excellence and Fort Gordon and Army soldiers throughout the entire armed forces, how powerful this is for universities, for institutions of higher learning to recognize the knowledge, skills, and abilities of our workforce and to earn college credit in doing so. It's absolutely fantastic. And I'm just going to go ahead and roll right into signing the second one. Ed, go ahead.
On the next, Dr. Kevin S. Floyd, Associate Dean and Professor of School of Computing for the Middle Georgia State University, will sign with the Cyber Center of Excellence Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you, sir.
These types of partnerships between academia and the Department of Defense are essential to building, sustaining, and growing the competent workforce that is capable of supporting the needs of our great nation. We thank you for your attendance and support of this program. Thank you very much.
Appreciate all the time.
Please welcome General Frederberg back to the stage.
All right, this is why I am not worried about our future, because we have educators that are making a difference, and we have partnerships for purpose to get after these challenges here today. We're going to now move to our lunch break. Lunch is going to be served on the exhibit floor. During the lunch break, there are other sessions in our engagement theater from our exhibitor demo sessions. And then after lunch, we have 3 more opportunities for you. At 1 p.m. in Lamar A, we have a CMMC session that's also approved for continuing education. And also at 1 o'clock, Lamar C, CompTIA, is presenting another session. And then right back in this room, we're going to have our next keynote session, and we're going to hear from the Office of the DoD CIO. If you need to get your badge scanned, please scan that on the way out. And ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy your lunch.